One day in the summer, my boyfriend and I went to the beach for vacation. At that time, my boyfriend's friend Beta and his girlfriend were also traveling with us. My boyfriend had a motorcycle, so he rode it by himself. Beta had a car, so the remaining 3 of us took his car. The 4 of us had a great time at the beach. It was getting dark and we were about to go home. On the way to pick up the car, Beta suddenly said to my boyfriend, "Let's compete to see who gets home first." Because the 4 of us lived in the same apartment, our goals were in the same place. So my boyfriend agreed to Beta's racing invitation. On the way back, they started racing. In the end, Beta and his girlfriend arrived first. My friend was happy to win the race, but I was a little worried. My boyfriend rode a motorcycle very skillfully. Logically speaking, he should have arrived first, but he never came back that night. When I woke up the next day, I heard what I couldn't believe. Kid Ada and his girlfriend came to my room with a sad and uneasy look. Kid Ada spoke up. "This morning, I received a notification from the police saying that your boyfriend, Takehara, had a car accident while turning and hit the guardrail. He died on the spot." After hearing the news, I couldn't accept it and fell to the ground sadly. However, Beta and his girlfriend went on to tell an even more shocking news. It was Beta's girlfriend who spoke first. "We just didn't call the police for contact. Is it morning?" In fact, after that, someone came to our room and knocked on the door. We didn't know who it was, so we asked who it was. Then the person replied that he was Takehara, which made us very scared. At that time, I couldn't understand what he was. Kid Ada said that he just looked at them quietly and then said that we thought it was a prank. So we planned to scold him loudly, but it was really him. Because we saw him on the screen of the doorbell intercom, we were not joking. At that time, we were too scared to open the door. Then they warned me that if Takehara comes to find you, don't open the door anyway. Because I think Takehara is likely to drag us into his world. After Beta wanted to drag us into his world, they left my room. I started to recall all the memories with my boyfriend, and then I cried alone. And that night, someone suddenly knocked on my door. I thought to myself it was him who came. I suppressed my sadness and ignored his knocking on the door, while my boyfriend kept knocking on the door and yelling for me to open the door quickly. At that time, I hid in the corner of the room and tried my best to cover my ears. But the memories and nostalgia made me irresistible. Finally, I walked towards the door. My boyfriend outside shouted, "Open the door! It's me!" Then the knocking on the door became louder and louder. I quietly walked to the door. I could see through the peephole that the person outside was really my boyfriend. After I reached him, I couldn't help but shed tears. Unknowingly, I almost couldn't help but want to open the door. But I also remembered that he was already dead. So I shouted, "You are already dead." After I finished shouting, the knock on the door became louder. The knocking became more and more violent. At that time, I wanted to let my boyfriend rest as soon as possible. In desperation, I made up my mind and opened the door. I opened the door and said loudly, "Takehara, you are dead." At this moment, my boyfriend's face was in front of mine. He said coldly, "It should be you who died." At that time, I was so frightened that I fainted. When I woke up again, I found myself lying on the bed in the treatment room. In front of me was my boyfriend who was supposed to be dead. His face was pressed against mine and he was crying tears of joy. Regarding the situation in front of me, I couldn't understand my boyfriend at all. He said to me that day when we were competing, "When I got home first, I waited for you downstairs for a long time but never waited for you to come back. So I decided to go back and check on you. As a result, I saw you on the way. The car completely crashed. Kid Ada and the others who were sitting in the front seat died on the spot. You were only injured, but you remained unconscious after being sent to the hospital." When I heard these things, I just accepted the fact that Kid Ada and the others were dead at first. But soon I felt extremely scared and hugged my boyfriend tightly. Because Beta died in the car accident, they may have entered my spiritual world in some way. They tried to prevent me from waking up and took me to their world. If I had ignored my boyfriend's call outside the door, I might never have woken up. If you're enjoying the video, please Please subscribe the channel for future videos, and like and share with your friends. This is the story of my personal experience. Although nothing particularly obvious happened, it always felt a little weird and strange. I used to frequent a national chain ramen shop because I commuted to work. Since I drive, I often go out to eat by myself. As a solo guest, the waiter always arranges for me to sit in the same seat. One day, I sat down as usual and ordered a set meal with fried rice. While waiting for the food, I took out my phone and randomly searched some words on my mobile browser to kill time. Suddenly, I noticed that the screen on my phone looked different from usual. There were several lines of eye-catching large characters offering help. It said, "You can consult the mental health consultation hotline now." It was then that I realized I had unintentionally entered keywords related to suicide. I remembered there had been recent news about celebrity suicides. Those web pages usually have mental health-related links. Maybe I accidentally clicked on them. I thought it was a good thing if these messages could help someone. But at that moment, I realized something disturbing. I had actually searched for the word suicide at this location last week. I looked around the store to see if there was any information or clues related to suicide, but there was nothing. I don't have any thoughts of dying, and I haven't experienced anything desperate recently. But the memory of searching for that word didn't feel like a simple sense of déjà vu. It was distinctly creepy. The more I thought about it, the more I felt something was wrong. Could it be related to the location? My intuition told me that something dangerous might happen if I stayed in that store. So, I quickly got up, apologized to the store clerk, and left in a hurry. The next day, I shared this experience on social media. After posting, I received many private messages and comments. People warned me, "Be careful. Never go to that store again. Don't search for strange words at will." I felt a little uneasy but didn't take it too seriously. I thought the netizens were being too sensitive. After a few days, I put the matter behind me. However, one day after work, I was stuck in traffic and video chatting with my girlfriend. We were discussing dinner when she suddenly said seriously, "You won't go to that ramen shop again, will you? Remember not to go there again." I smiled and told her perfunctorily, "There's no way I could go there again. Don't worry." But at that moment, I suddenly saw the signboard of the ramen shop not far in front of me. My heart sank. I immediately turned the steering wheel and left the road. My girlfriend saw the background through the video and noticed my actions. She spoke in a more relaxed tone and said, "You can go to a nearby udon shop, but not near the ramen shop." I answered her, pretending not to care. I said I was just passing by, but inside, I felt strange. Later, when I arrived at my destination and was about to end the call, my girlfriend suddenly screamed. She said, "Wait, isn't that the ramen shop? I see its sign in the background." At that moment, my mind went blank. I had accidentally returned to that shop. Without thinking, I started the engine and fled the place in a hurry. To this day, I'm still not sure if there's some kind of power at work there, attracting people. If my girlfriend hadn't reminded me, would I have sat in that familiar position again and searched for keywords like suicide? What would have happened if this situation had continued? I really don't know, and I don't dare to imagine. Not long ago, my father remarried. I welcomed a new mother, but that woman was a disgusting woman like in the TV series. She always had a nice face towards my father, but she cursed in front of me. That day, my father went on a trip with that woman, so I decided to invite friends to spend the night. The three of us love horror stories very much. That day, we browsed various horror websites on the computer. But the ordinary supernatural experience could no longer satisfy us. So we started to read some cursed suicide websites and other dangerous things. At that time, we discovered a curse method that brings misfortune to annoying people. The specific steps of this method are to first put a 10 yuan coin in a plastic bottle in the middle of the night. Put the annoying person's hair in it. Then silently recite the annoying person's name in your heart and say 2 words. After the person dies, put the cap on the bottle and bury it in the shrine. The curse will automatically take effect. The cursed person will fall into the abyss of misfortune. This content sounds like a curse method thought up by elementary school students. But other curses require the use of cats, blood, or mouse corpses, hard to obtain materials. So we decided to try this first. We brought a plastic bottle and then took the hair from the woman's pillow. My friend was a little worried and asked what if I was really cursed. But in my heart, I really wanted to let such a woman die. So I decided to do it without hesitation. The room was bright, but I felt a strange feeling in the space. After I put the 10 yuan coin and the woman's hair in, I felt in my heart, silently saying, "No matter what god it is, please kill that woman." Then we put the cap on the bottle. Because there was a shrine behind my house, we immediately ran to bury it. Regardless of whether the curse was effective or not, I thought to myself that she deserved it. Then we went home. About a week later, one day the woman came up the stairs. I fell down and sprained my foot. 3 days later, I fell down from a high place and broke my nose bone. I thought the curse seemed to be effective. So I went to tell my friend who had practiced the curse together that the effect had come out. However, my friend quietly said, "You did it wrong. I didn't realize that the 10 yuan coin couldn't be put into the plastic bottle." At that time, I thought what this guy was talking about. But when I tried to put the 10 yuan coin into the plastic bottle again, I found that it couldn't be put in. My friend actually wanted to tell me this, but he couldn't say it because he was scared. Why did it go in so smoothly that night? I have an ominous feeling in my heart, so I'm going to dig it out at the shrine now. I now work in a bank as an ordinary intermediary manager. But before I graduated from middle school, I lived in a typical rural town. Let's describe the place where almost all children will move to the city after high school. Some families even move with the whole family. This is not uncommon in the area. Therefore, my hometown at that time was almost half the scene of old people and half children. Before getting to the point, let me explain that I don't have any supernatural powers, but I did have a terrifying experience that I will never forget. It was when I was in the lower grade of elementary school. Although my memory is a little fuzzy at a young age, I still can't forget that incident. It was very popular among children at that time to establish secret bases. One day, I and 4 of my friends who played well together went into a nearby hill with snacks and toys to play. Our secret base was located in a mountain near the school. There was an abandoned cabin inside. We barely made any modifications to it. There is a trail near the cabin that is used as the base. It should be that the original animal trail was slightly widened and could barely accommodate 1 person. We jokingly call that trail an improved animal trail. But what is surprising is that there is a toilet next to the base. Of course, the toilet was actually just a simple toilet with a hole dug and surrounded by wooden boards. But for children, this is already a very luxurious facility. That day, we went into the mountains to explore and played too late. One of the friends said, "I'm sorry, I want to go to the toilet first." The others laughed and said, "I don't want to go to the toilet at this time." I asked if the toilet was a large one. My friend said, "No, you should go back first." We saw our friend enter the toilet and then went home through the modified animal path. Suddenly, our friend screamed. We turned around and saw his face. He rushed out of the toilet palely, with a woman's head floating behind him, and a pair of angry, wide-open eyes staring at us. The 5 of us were frightened, and then we screamed and ran home as hard as we could. We were asked by our family why we came back so late, so we told them everything we saw in the toilet. Later, the village god came to perform an exorcism ceremony for us. After the ceremony, the god said to us that we should be fine. After hearing this, we finally breathed a sigh of relief and felt like we were walking out of endless darkness. The toilet was later completely blocked. It was said that it was locked up with chains and big locks, and the secret base was demolished. But even if the base was not demolished, we would not have the courage to go near that place. The friend who went to the toilet that day died suddenly in the spring of the 2nd year of junior high school. The cause of death was unknown, but it was not suicide. Many years later, when I returned to my hometown to visit my grandparents, I stopped by to visit the elderly priest. At that time, he told me something about that toilet. In fact, that place had been there for a long time. It is considered an ominous place. It is said that in the Edo period, a young man and woman from different villages were beheaded in public because of a love dispute. The place where the toilet is may be the place of execution. I thought that after many rituals, the spirits should have calmed down. But maybe I underestimated their grievances. I felt shuddered after hearing the words of the priest. The priest finally said something, saying that the child may have encountered that resentment head-on, so he really can't save him. So far, the toilet has not been occupied. I don't know if anyone would dare to go near it. I have been in poor health recently and have been hospitalized for a few days due to examinations. However, the results of this examination will probably not be able to diagnose the cause. I lost both ears when I was 8 years old. The cause of the hearing loss is still unknown. When I was living in my hometown in the countryside, I would occasionally hear terms such as tribes. Although our family was originally from the same county, we moved here from other places after all, so we were not well received. The people in the village are not very friendly to us, but there is an old lady, let's call her Grandma Duoing. She probably thought I was a pitiful child, so she sometimes gave me snacks and was very gentle and kind to me. At that time, I was experiencing some mild bullying and had no friends to play with, so I would go to Grandma Duoing's house almost every day to help her farm and listen to what she said. That day after school, I went to see Grandma Duoing as usual. She should be in the fields at this time, but she was nowhere to be seen. So I walked to the door of her house and opened the door without even ringing the doorbell. But there was no one in the house. Just when I was about to leave, a faint human voice came from the depths of the house. When I heard it, I said, "Excuse me," and walked into her house without authorization. I called Grandma Duoing, but there was no one in the house. I felt a little strange when people responded, but just as I was about to leave, I heard the faint voice again. At that time, I thought it must be Grandma Duoing. I called Grandma Duoing and walked into the house, but no one responded. The sound continued to come from the room deep in the house that I had never entered before. I mustered up the courage to walk towards the room that I had never entered before. When I got there, I opened the door of the room and found that there was a door behind the sliding door, and it was covered with charms, and the faint human voice came from inside, but I couldn't hear clearly what was being said. At that time, when I was young, I felt a little scared when I saw those charms, but I also thought that Grandma Duoing might be unwell and lying inside and resting. So I mustered up the courage to open the door. When I opened it, there was no Grandma Duoing inside. The room was almost empty. I only saw a large Buddhist altar or a shrine inside. From the Buddhist altar, a gentle and subtle voice came. The sound was like the chirping of mosquitoes. Since I couldn't hear clearly what he was saying, I wanted to walk into the Buddhist altar. However, the moment I was about to step into the room, a strong sense of fear came over me, as if to warn me of danger. Although I stopped for a while, I continued walking towards the Buddhist altar step by step as if attracted by some kind of force. When I reached the Buddhist altar, I heard the faint voice again. He said, "Can my child help me open this place?" Although my instinct told me that I must not open it, my body reached out uncontrollably to touch the door of the Buddhist altar. The moment I opened the Buddhist altar, I closed my eyes, and when I mustered up the courage to open my eyes, I saw a bunch of flowers inside. At this time, the voice of Grandma Duoing came from the entrance, calling Xiaoxin, "Are you here?" After hearing Grandma Duoing's shout, I hurriedly closed the door of the Buddhist altar and wanted to leave the room quickly, but Grandma Duoing had already walked to the room. The door was open and she approached me with a face full of fear. She asked me seriously, "Xiaoxin, what are you doing here?" I heard the sound and thought it was Grandma inside. Grandma Duoing asked me hurriedly, "Did you open it? Did you open that door?" At that time, I was afraid of being blamed by Grandma Duoing, so I lied and said I didn't open it. After hearing this, Grandma Duoing knelt down and cried. She said happily that it was too good, just didn't open it. After that, she took me out of the room, closed the two doors and said, Let's go to the temple now. Your parents' grandma will inform them for you. Don't worry. Although I didn't know what happened at that time, I still followed her to the temple. There was already a kind monk waiting for us at the entrance of the temple. The monk looked about 40 years old and was very kind. The monk said, "Please go this way." I walked into the temple and the monk asked me in a low voice, "I heard about the situation. You only entered that place. The door to the Buddhist altar was not opened in the room." At that time, I didn't know how to answer. So Grandma Duoying asked Xiaoxin again, "Did you not open it?" Although I couldn't figure out what happened, I knew that if the situation became serious, I might be scolded. So I lied again and lowered my head and replied silently, "No." The monk heard it and said, "That's fine. I will chant sutras and deal with it." Then I underwent a ritual similar to exorcism at the temple. When I left, the monk gave me an amulet with a charm on it. I took it. When the amulet left the temple, my parents were already waiting for me at the gate of the temple. Grandma Duoying seemed to be apologizing to my parents, but my father interrupted her directly and told her not to approach our children again. Grandma Duoying lowered her head with a sad face. On the way back in the car, I tried to explain to my parents that it was not Grandma's fault, but my own fault. I went in, but they just said that from now on I would not go to that house again. That night, I was exhausted and went to bed early. I put the amulet next to the pillow. I don't know how long it took. When I woke up, I accidentally saw the amulet being torn into pieces. At this time, I noticed something strange, the quiet terror around me. Not even a sound of insects. Suddenly, I felt something outside the window. When I turned around, I saw a person. When I saw the woman there, I immediately turned away, but that figure was still fresh in my memory. The woman's hair was messy. The skin on her face was abnormally bright red. Her eyes were as deep as black holes, and the corners of her mouth were split, and she was smiling horribly. I was so frightened that I quickly shrank back into bed and my whole body was shaking. Only then did I realize something. I couldn't even hear the sound of the quilt rubbing against me. It seemed that it wasn't that the surroundings had become quiet, but that my ears were deaf. The next day, my parents took me to the doctor and the diagnosis was that the cause was unknown because my ear structure was normal. My parents vaguely felt that this matter was related to what happened at Grandma Duoying's house, but out of fear they chose not to get involved. Soon after, it was said that Grandma Duoying set fire to her home, and she was buried in the house and disappeared together with the house. A few years later, I ran to the temple to find a monk and told him what happened. Because I couldn't hear, we had a written conversation with a pen. At that time, I asked the monk what it was. Monk Dongshi wrote that he called Na to fool the master, and that woman was a cursed sacrifice. Grandma Duoying's family was responsible for protecting him for generations and was not allowed to be disclosed to outsiders. Because Grandma Duoying was estranged from her family, she took on the responsibility of protecting him, and she finally committed suicide out of guilt because of illegal contact. Because you open the door to the Buddhist temple, that woman is already free. She will probably harm that woman again. In fact, I can't expel the amulet you received that night. Maybe it saved your life. Your deafness and the condition of the amulet are enough to show the danger of that thing. The monk suggested that I had better forget all this, but I can never forget the smile of the woman with abnormally bright red skin. After many years, I always feel that I will not survive. For too long, there have been frequent incidents of foreigners invading temples and stealing Buddha statues. Could it be that something terrible has been released? I feel scared when I think that something terrible like that has been released. Finally, I advise everyone to be overly curious, but there will be danger. I work in a company that often requires overtime until very late, so I frequently take the last tram back to the station in the countryside. When the last tram arrives, there is almost no one there. When I first started at the company, I often waited on the empty platform for the last tram. However, one time, as I was waiting as usual, I suddenly felt a strong push from behind. I almost fell onto the rails under the platform. I was so surprised that I immediately turned around, but I saw no one and nothing. Then I heard a voice. It was a male voice that felt very cheerful. He laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was very panicked at that time. I just hoped that the train would arrive faster." But that voice would appear every 2 or 3 months. Once I was pushed when I was going down the stairs. Another time, I felt my hand being pulled as the tram doors were about to close. Every time I heard that cheerful male voice, the voice always laughed and said, sorry, but there was no one in the place where the voice came from. I just heard it like this. Later, as I became more familiar with the company and my work got on track, I went out drinking with my seniors one evening. Afterward, I was waiting for the last train as usual. Suddenly, someone pushed me hard from behind again. Because I was drunk, I became a little bolder. I yelled angrily, "Have you had enough?" Then I heard the voice again. It was still the cheerful male voice. He laughed and said, "Haha, sorry. I will definitely kill you next time." Since that day, I started riding a bicycle and taking the bus to and from work. Although commuting has become very inconvenient, I don't want to die.